if you took 1 naira, you're a thief. Even those who are stealing 3,000 or 1,000 naira at the marketplace are stoned to death. You know, they are burnt. Not to talk of somebody who is reigning on billions and is sitting comfortably. That is still living in the bungalows instead of the prisons. And so we want to encourage and advise and also encourage President Muhammad. We are happy that he's fighting corruption, but we are saying death sentence should go to the corrupt leaders. I think that is one. So I agree with the gentleman completely. And then because when you want to analyze it, you look at the roads. Nigeria should declare the roads, you know, a state of emergency for the Nigerian roads. Because I don't know about you going to your village, but going to my village that should take maybe 3 hours is taking about 7-8 hours. There are places that, and right now, we are having all the airlines. If you want to go to the east, or you want to go to any part of the country, you can't have any booking before the end of the year. What is the reason? The roads are not, you know, places to go, and so everybody feels, even when they are squeezing themselves, they want to book an airline. So there are no flights. We have people who were supposed to come for this event who could not get a flight. For the next one week, they can't get a flight to come to Abuja. And so the issue fighting for, who else is going to fight that cause? Can we go together as a bunch? Can we go together like a broom? If you go alone, they can hit you. But if you go together, together we can make it better. We can achieve more. Please do not go it alone. And that is why, even in this fight, in the struggle for, you know, fighting corruption, we have to go together with all citizens, and we go with all stakeholders. We are happy that you have been able to make it here. We look forward to seeing you again a week from now, and we say congratulations, everyone. The struggle continues.
The whole idea behind this freedom of information law, when civil society put it together, along with some other sunshine laws, I think that includes the Fiscal Responsibilities Act,
yes,
then, and perhaps 1 or 2 other laws. These were supposed to be a bouquet of sunshine laws. The idea was to give true meaning to democracy. The question is, almost 20 years down the line, are we enjoying the fruits of the efforts to make democracy make meaning and give dividends to Nigerians? At this point, I think members of the audience too are welcome to get involved in the discussions. And what we want to find out is if there's anybody here who also has experience to share with us, we will be able to listen to that. At the end of the day, first we will be trying to extract some commitment from you, sir. But at that point, I'll let you know. The commitment will be that the National Assembly should live by example. If the National Assembly is seen to be obeying this law, woe betides, apologies, woe betides the executive.
Secondly, the female on the panel said we can approach court. I'm afraid there are intricacies, technical intricacies involved in litigation, and by any little slip, the matter is thrown out. So what is
Center for Investigative Reporting, ICIR, and 5 other civil society organizations puts the denial of access to public information requested under the FOI law at about 65%. Sorry, 56 actually, 56%. The chance of getting all information requested was just 33%, while the chance of getting a partial response to information requested was put at 10.5%. It was worse in 2017 when only 73 out of 900 public institutions complied with the provisions of the FOI law. Let me take the figure again. In 2017, there were just only 73 out of 900 public institutions that complied with the provisions of the FOI law. So, if Nigerians do not have access to public information, how then do they hold their representatives in government accountable for anything, let alone a national development plan that we are advocating? Now, I'm joined for today's discussions, I'm joined by Mr. Larry Arungudade, who is Director International Press Center, IPC, in Lagos, Nigeria's foremost media capacity development organization, and one of the leading organizations advocating for press freedom that utilizes the FOI on a regular basis. He is our lead speaker today. Mr. Larry Arobudade, good to see you.
Thank you very much.
Well,
Good evening, everybody.
thank you. A very warm welcome to you. He will not be alone this afternoon. He is joined by a panel. First, let me introduce from my immediate left here, Anne Iyonu. Anne is a development consultant with Open Government Partnership. She's one of our panelists today. Good to see you, Anne.
If you are looking at the fact that we have over 500, and you actually said
900.
about 900 ministries, departments, and agencies of government, so that shows low level of compliance. Among those 70, there are a few encouraging ones who responded to almost all the applications that they received. So, for example, the Central Bank of Nigeria got 34 in 2018, and they responded to 34. INEC, the Independent National Electoral Commission, got 23, and they responded to 22. The National Bureau of Statistics got very high figure. They got 513, which I think is also positive, which means Nigerians are interested in accountability issues, so they are requesting for figures. So they got 513 requests, and they responded to all the 513. And then we have the National Power Institute, which got 186 and responded to 186. But the flip side is that there are important agencies of government that are not even responding at all. And some of you might know that the media rights agenda, which led the rest of civil society and media organizations to advocate and campaign for this law up to 2011 when we have it, has instituted what is called the FOI Hall of Shame, where it listed public institutions that have just blatantly refused to respond to FOI requests. And among these public institutions are the NNPC, the Nigerian National Petroleum Corporation, the Ministry of Education, the Bureau of Public Procurement. Now, when you are talking of transparency or accountability, these are key institutions, and we have 68 of them listed. So while you have 70 in the record of Attorney General, you have almost an equal number that simply refuse to respond to FOI requests, up to a situation whereby they had to be inducted into an FOI Hall of Shame. Now, on the demand side, on the part of citizens, I would say that the usage rate has not been as encouraging. But sometimes you don't also blame the citizens for nothing. According to the guidelines from the Office of the Attorney General, each ministry or department or agency of government is supposed to have an officer designated as an FOI officer. So as I walk to maybe NNPC or any other institution, Ministry of Power, it should be displayed for me that if you have any FOI request, submit it to this particular office. These things are not put in place. So we feel that the rate of usage is not that encouraging. But on the part of the civil society, I would say it's been quite above average. We have civil society organizations like SERAP, for example, that frequently makes FOI requests. My organization, the International Press Center, we also made FOI requests, but that was under Jonathan after we had compiled his campaign promises. And after 1 year in office, we requested for information on the state of implementation of those promises. Not to take much time, we need to talk about the media, because the media was at the forefront of the fight for the Freedom of Information Act. As a media practitioner myself, or media professional, I would say that the level of usage among those of us in the media is not that encouraging. Journalists also talk about their frustration, that if you make this request, it may not be replied. They also fear for their safety, because some of them are investigative journalists. And if they are making inquiries about issues of abuse of power or corruption, they have that fear that something could happen to them. But we say that, look, we need to keep testing this law. We need to keep making applications, because the more applications we make, the more citizens will be aware about how government is responding. So to conclude, I would just say that for a law that is meant to be a major instrument for fighting corruption in our society, we have not seen that attitude or that body language from the side of the government that shows that they actually take this law very, very seriously. Otherwise, at the level of proactive disclosure, We should have moved beyond that point because we're talking about 8 years after. And at the level of compliance, we should have a better, record. But it's also good to put it on record that the Office of the Attorney General actually issued guidelines to all ministries, agencies, and government, but we don't have compliance. One other area, finally, where we seem to have a major problem is that when government institutions refuse to respond to FOI requests and individuals and organizations go to court, it is the same Ministry of Justice, the same Office of the Attorney General, that is the custodian that is supposed to perform oversight functions on FOI, that goes to court to spend taxpayers' money to defend, agencies that are actually flouting its own directive. So we think it's contradictory, and this is the kind of forum where we could publicly call, on the Attorney General and the Minister of Justice to say that, please, just tell these people to go and comply. Yeah. Don't defend them. Don't use our money to, defend them, because this is a law of which your office is the custodian. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Arokodade. You have actually given us a lot to chew. First, I'd like you to explain some things to us on the issue of proactive disclosure, for instance. Does the law specify what form of information MDAs are requested to proactively disclose without anybody making requests?
Yes. First, they are supposed to provide information about all, their officers or personnel. They're supposed to provide information about what they do. They're supposed to provide information about, their budgets and how they are spending it. Any information that is in public, interest, they're supposed to have it on their websites. They're supposed to have it at a designated place in their offices. This is what the law, clearly, states. There are some information that under this FOI Act are exempt, that is, based on some considerations, the law says you may not provide this information. But at the end of the day, there are only 3 categories of information that the FOI Act says cannot, be provided. Information relating to a relationship between, doctors or physicians and their patients, relationship between, lawyers and their clients, and then, journalism privilege. That is where you get an information. The law allows you not to disclose that. That is in section 16 of the Act. But on every other issue, even issue of security, the law is very, very clear, or the Act. It says that where there is overriding public interest in such, they should be released. So the good thing about the Nigerian FOI Act is actually that it empowers the public, such that even in those areas where there are those exempt clauses, there's also always that clause there that says that if it is in the public interest for such information to be disclosed, they shall be disclosed. But it's only the court of law that can also determine that, because an agency of government might say, we can't disclose this because of security. Yeah. So if we go to court, then we expect the court to say whether it should be disclosed or not, if they are convinced that there's an overriding public interest in that.
All right. We need to, one of the assignments for us here this afternoon is to identify all of these obstacles that will make it difficult for citizens. Because in most of the cases that you have cited, people who have requested for information had been at institutional level.
Yes.
We need to identify the obstacles that citizens need to conquer for them to be able to make use of this law. But let me come back to you. Do you still sense a kind of government resistance to the idea of this law? The idea of opening up government to the people? The idea of making democracy to attain its full meaning?
In 1999, the National Assembly budget was 6.9 billion. 2018, the National Assembly budget is 139 billion. It has not increased its membership. It has only added 1 or 2 agencies, yet the budget has, what's the mass? Has it tripled or quadrupled from 6.9 to 139? And yet we don't have a breakdown of the budget. Like Mr. Larry said, the law applies to all public institutions. It applies to all arms of government. It's important that we state that. And the National Assembly is an arm of government. The executive is an arm of government. If you, the National Assembly, who is supposed to provide oversight to other MDAs, you are not complying, what does that tell you?
The lawmaker is breaking the law. The National Assembly made this law. We know that, well, this probably wasn't the idea of the National Assembly. this was a civil society-driven law
Yes.
that the National Assembly had to inherit and then push through. Let me ask from the Director of Legal Services of the National Assembly, why the National Assembly is not leading by example here?
Well, as you have rightly pointed out, that the origin of the act came from the city, and the good intent of the act is well known to Nigerians. So it has a good purpose and intention. But at the same time, even though I'm one of the bureaucrats, I'm working under the elected officials, and I cannot speak exactly for them, but I work under them. Yes. There is non-compliance.
Even as Director of Legal Services?
No, the reason why I'm saying that, I speak for the bureaucracy.
Yes.
Not for the
lawmakers.
For the lawmakers. But I can speak also about the institution.
Yes.
You understand? The issue of non-compliance and issue of violation, nobody can doubt that. And it's not only in the National Assembly. And I think basically that's the reason why we are here. We want to assess what are the obstacles.
What are the obstacles?
Exactly.
What are the obstacles from the National Assembly body? Because the bureaucrats are the ones who are supposed to make the information available, not the lawmakers.
Well,
the lawmakers,
yeah.
Their job is cut out, make law, represent people, and all of that. But the bureaucrats are the ones that are the custodian of the information. They're the ones on whose shoulders the responsibility rests to make information freely and willingly available to the people.
Then again,
and you are part of that.
Yeah, I'm part of
system,
that.
Yes.
Based on that, I'm always advocating that even the media practitioners, they need to thoroughly understand the content of the act. Because if you are not aware of the content of the act, that will limit your effort of pushing for information. Now, secondly, we have this issue of bureaucracy, this original idea of secrecy and confidentiality in governance. And again, what do you call it? So many factors like that are hindering the implementation of the act. So members, quite all right, the fight and the effort from the civil societies and generally the non-compliance by an institution is a great concern to all of us. So therefore, see the example you have given about the Attorney General. Attorney General has issued a guideline of how the act should be implemented. At the same time, if there is any complaint, you know, it will go to the court, and then he will be the one again to now defend the institution that did not comply. So we need to actually investigate more and then find a concrete way of dealing with the lawmakers. You understand? They are not an exception. So, yes, because if you check what is happening in every jurisdiction, they really regard this act very, very important. Why? Because for any good democracy to stay, there must be right which has been guaranteed to citizens to access information, to access records in any public institution. There are no exceptions. Yes. Even some areas which are regarded as exemptions, like Larry has already cited an example, issue of national security, national defense, there's qualification. But apart from those areas where legally an institution is not supposed to release information to the public because of certain consideration, but what of other aspects that are not regarded as national security, national defense? People must be accountable.
That's the question Nigerians are asking, and we're focusing, because we're here, we're worried that the National Assembly is not answering that. If the National Assembly cannot lead by example, the National Assembly that made this law, to all intents and purposes, if that arm of government is not leading by example, can we really expect much from the other arms of government?
Well, it kind of discourages other arms of government not to respond or comply with the FOI Act. But then I believe all hope is not lost, because I'm aware that a practice directive for judges was produced. And so if you get the Judicial Council or the National Judicial Institute to buy into that directive for judges, and then they speedily advocate on FOI cases, it will be good, because then we can take every FOI case, you can take it to court. It is important to note that every provision of the Act is enforceable. And so I think when we begin to take these lawmakers, we begin to take MDAs to court, and public officials, either as a person or as MDA, as a person or institutions, begin to go to jail for certain things, they will sit up. The drafters of the good law thought it wise not to include punitive measures at the beginning, because they wanted everybody to get used to it. But apparently it seems not to be working, and I will not recommend that we take it back to the National Assembly to amend to add punitive measures, because when you take it to National Assembly, they will water it down. So it's better.
Particularly, I'm also aware that one of the judgments on a request made was actually suggesting something that may amount to a watering down of the law. That's the judgment of, I think, Justice Kolawole also, in the case against Dr. Ruben Abati. I'm not so sure whether you are aware of that.
Okay, I'm not aware of that. And
it's a freedom of information request.
So there's a need to build the capacity of the judiciary. We can't do this alone. As members of the public, as civil society, we can't do this alone. There's a need to build the capacity of judges, to be on board, because at the end of the day, I think the judiciary seems to be our last hope.
Larry, we have a problem here. It's like,
yes.
It's like this is supposed to be democracy. It's supposed to be giving. If this is about us, if government is about us, and it's not for them alone, why should you and I have to labor to be part of the government that is supposed to be for us? Because that's what this is boiling down to. And I'm not aware that there should be room for any kind of meritocracy within democracy.
Well, I quite agree with you. And I think recently there's been a lot of debate about what we call the shrinking civic space, the space for democratic rights in Nigeria, and how we need to respond, to this. For me, I feel that one of the things we need to begin to do is to get every other person. Recently, we had circulated the contact details of all senators, members of House of Representatives. Let each and everybody in various constituencies, write FOI requests. Even to their, said, through them, we are requesting for information on your budget. I mean, we
need even to start with their salary on what you earn.
The salaries, yes. on what they earn. And as a matter of fact,
publish what you earn.
The FOI Act, actually, these are the kind of information they are supposed to proactively, disclose. You need not labor to know what, the chief judge earns. That is there. And in any case, it's supposed to be in the public realm, because what they earn is determined, or is supposed to be determined by the, federal, commission, the Revenue Mobilization, Commission. Yeah. So it shouldn't be, a secret. And I feel that this is where we really have a problem. And of course, we've been talking about ministries, departments, and agencies, more or less at the federal level. We also have problems with state governments who simply say, we're in a federation. This is, we are practicing federalism. Because of that, FOI Act does not apply to us. In some instances, they even say that you need to domesticate the acts before it can be implemented in their respective states. And we keep telling them that this is just illiteracy, because it is international laws or whatever that you domesticate, not a law that is actually a domestic law. In the context of Nigeria, the Freedom of Information Act is a domestic law. So there is no need to further, domesticate it before state governments, can apply. And that was where we had some problem with some judges. And I'm happy that Anne is really raising this. Because there was a judge in Lagos that actually gave a ruling and said that the state government was not banned by the FOI Act because, it's a federal law.
But hasn't that judge been overruled?
It's since been overruled. But I feel that the judiciary has a crucial role to play in all these things. But we citizens also have a lot of role, because this information are in the public domain. We need to just keep, sending this, requests until it gets to a time that there will be some form of public outcry. The other thing I need to mention is also the fact that the law also recognizes that disadvantaged groups in Nigeria could also request for information. So if you go through the Act, for example, you don't have to be literate to be able to use the Act. It actually mandates public institutions. If I go to an office and I say, I speak my local language and I say, I need this information, they are supposed to help you put down that request, and then the information is available. In fact, they are supposed to develop templates of requesting for information. So the Act envisages a situation whereby people, who have one disability or the other could actually request for information, even if you cannot, speak or whatever. They are supposed to do this. So what we have not seen is government institutions, not just at the federal level, at the state and the local government levels, complying with the provisions of this Act. And whatever we can do to put pressure on them to do this, it's what we need to consider. The implication of the FOI Act is that it's supposed to automatically, nullify or remove from our statute books any law that's against disclosure of information, including the Official Secrets Act that you talk about. We do know, however, that civil servants are still required to take one form of oath or the other. But even at that, the FOI Act protects public officials that provide information. So there's a whistleblower protection clause in the Act that says that if you, as a civil servant, you provide information under this Act, you are not supposed to be liable. You are not supposed to face any form of sanction or the other. That one is there. Now, my friend there raised the question of if the institution that enacted the Act, the law, is also not following it, that we are quite hopeless. I wouldn't say that we are that hopeless. It's true that the National Assembly passed the bill, but it was the executive that signed it into law. So we're actually dealing with two arms of government here, the legislature and the executive, and then actually the judiciary also, which is playing its own role. So, and that's why I keep saying that let's make more requests to say that National Assembly members must disclose their salaries using the FOI Act, and then it becomes embarrassing for them to refuse to disclose that.
But these are information,
but as regards
these are information that should be proactively disclosed.
Yes, they are supposed to be proactively disclosed, but where they are not, then you can also make requests. In fact, you can make requests to say that one of the things we need to look at, but now it's advising about going to court, because we could actually go to court to say that this information are supposed to be there. You have already violated the Act. But we're dealing with a complex situation in Nigeria, and I'm speaking from experience, being involved in all of this. And I would think that while in some cases we go to court, we do advocacy, we do campaigns, even protests, we also need to do more engagements, because we have a mixed bag. In some instances, you see some positive signs, and then you need to follow that up. Part of the challenge is also the fact that the government itself has not helped the situation. Now, if you look at one of the organizations that has been inducted to this FOI Hall of Shame, is the Bureau of Public Procurement, to which FOI request has been made and there has been no response. If you look at it critically, do you really blame that Bureau of Public Procurement? In a sense, you might say no, because we're supposed to have, under the National Procurement Act, we are supposed to have the Procurement Council, which is actually supposed to perform the functions that the executive, because anytime we have the Federal Executive Council meeting, there are announcements after, maybe from a minister, or to say that the FEC has awarded this contract. That is supposed to be the work of the procurement or council. So if you send it, and where there is no procurement council, there might be no person to actually provide the kind of information that you need from the Bureau of Public Procurement. So one thing we need to do is to articulate measures that the federal government itself needs to take. And the question we need to ask really is that the kind of support that the EFCC is enjoying, the ICPC is enjoying from government, we do not see the Office of the Attorney General enjoy that with respect to the FOI Act, which is actually the real, because some of the problems that we have, if these informations are in the public domain, it would actually help to curb corruption. Because ab initio, you know that this is what you earn or you are supposed to earn. Then people can then look around their neighborhood and say, oh, we are seeing so many buildings springing up, and then we want to make FOI requests. But the empowerment aspect of it is quite important. I feel that is where area we have not really gone, even to make the law relevant to the people through translation into various languages that can be written and that can be spoken. So for me, the weapon is still mobilization. When there is enough pressure, they will not run away from it.
All right. The area that I also like us to beam a searchlight on is that we're looking at government from just one prison, which is the federal government there.
Exactly.
We're not particularly concerned about the other 36 centers of economic
No,
activity.
sorry, I need to even come in. It's not even just federal, states, and local governments.
Yeah.
The definition of public institutions under the FOI Act are, ministries, departments, agencies of government, and private companies utilizing public funds or rendering public services.
Yeah.
So, if our roads are bad, we need to make FOI requests to Julius Berger.
That's the point.
You see what I'm saying?
That is it. Citizens probably don't know
so,
the extent to which they can go in enforcing this law or trying to give ventilation to provisions of the law.
Exactly.
It's not just about government. It's also about institutions that do business with government.
So we can use FOI, for example, to request for contractors for the Ministry of Education. Yeah. And where you have interest in some areas, you can make FOI requests to that private company because they are utilizing public funds right. or rendering public services. It's very, very important. So it's not just about federal, state, or local governments alone. It's also about these huge companies that are taking money through contracts and are not performing those contracts.
What do we really need to do now? What are the immediate challenges that as citizens we need to conquer?
Is that it shines light on government processes and it makes it more transparent. It also improves public participation, and so people are able to hold government or those representing them accountable. But that's not happening. And for me, I would think till now, 8 years after, there's still a dearth of awareness in the public space. I was reading, someone brought to my attention the Speaker of the House of Reps, when he made a statement to ICPC about the constituency projects, and he said they could have invoked the FOI. Even the Speaker used the word, the FOI bill.
That's an oversight.
That was a slip
Well,
of
perhaps
Perhaps it was an
slip of tongue.
oversight. But for me, I was taken aback that if he could say bill, how much more somebody who doesn't understand? It's a law. It's not a bill. So there's a dearth of awareness in the public space, one. A lot of people are not aware about this act. And then even when they are aware, they tend to push it to us civil society members. I remember when I was working in the Right to Know, I used to get a lot of information like that. Could you push this information for us? And I always tell them, it's me and your law. It's your right to know what goes on. It's not just because I work in an NGO. So we need to escalate public awareness and sensitization of the act. That's one. Even the public servants themselves, those that work in MDAs, really don't understand the law. The law provides that MDAs should train their staff. But a lot of trainings that have happened in our public institutions have been carried out by NGOs, free of charge to these MDAs. So there has to be an upgrade, knowledge upgrade from the security guard, not just from whoever is going to handle FOI requests, from the security guard all the way to the top.
Perhaps it is still part of the reluctance that we are seeing in government, reluctance to open up government. People in government easily forget that when you open up government and you easily give information, there's less pressure on you.
Exactly.
If I know that I can get this information if I go to this place, why should I be belaboring you? Why should I want to go to court?
When people are appointed as SAs and whatever, I don't think that you'll be expecting too much to think they will still play the same role. Most often is the reverse, part of it. But we should not, lose focus. And I think the focus here really is that based on the practice guidelines from the Office of the Attorney General and the provisions of the FOI Act, they need to have FOI officers well designated in all ministries, departments, and agencies. So going forward, these are some of the demands that we need to make. Let us see that. Our anchor, Mr. Oliba, has talked about proactive, disclosure. And it says disclose it in a way that is understandable, and it listed the electronic means of display and the rest of them. We can insist on this. Maybe why would also shame those who have not complied. We can also find a way of not shaming, because where you have, even if it's just a minority, so we can use what we can call some kind of carrots and stick, approach to get them.
Yeah, because this discussion will continue after the formal ending here for the purposes of our live transmission on the 2 TV platforms and, of course, our live streaming. We'll end that session here, but of course the discussions will continue, so we'll still have more time to talk.
Thank you.
Because Mr. Yusuf, Hassan, sorry, Mr. MD Hassan, unfortunately you are the only state actor here. And so you are the only one.
Are you here as a state actor? He said it's individual.
Finish. We have what we call corrigendum. Sometimes when mistakes are discovered in the budget, sometimes they want to change the location or the title of the project, or they want to split the amount. So many legal luminaries threaten to take us to court on the basis that if you want to shift or touch or adjust anything in the budget, because it is an act, it has to go by way of amendment, not by corrigendum, where 2 chairmen of the appropriation committee will just sign.
Okay, you educate us a little bit on that, maybe after we have signed off.